So just this past weekend down at the Tom Jones Memorial, Julien Alfred, 100-meter Olympic champion, 200-meter Olympic silver medalist representing St. Lucia, she ran her first 200 meters of the 2025 season, and she dropped an immaculate performance, amazing time of 21.88 seconds, really kind of shutting down the rest of the field. And this was impressive for various different reasons, as we've seen Julien making significant progress over the past couple years since she, of course, left Texas in 2023. Like I said, went on to get the Olympic gold medal in the 100 last year. But there's a few specific reasons as to why I think this performance in the 200 is very, very impressive. Now, first off, of course, that individual time. It's extremely fast. It's actually only 0.02 of a second off her personal best of 21.86 seconds, which she actually ran just last year at the London Diamond League. And on top of that, this is a performance, a time that would have medaled at every single World Championships and Olympic Games in history, except for only the 2020 Tokyo Olympic Games. Every single other time, this is a performance that would have gotten a medal at a global championship. But on top of that, this is actually the second fastest 200-meter time ever run in the month of April, only behind Christine Mboma, who ran 21.87 seconds all the way back in 2022. So we're talking about 1/100th of a second, and this was actually a little bit earlier than Christine Mboma, who ran hers at the end of April in 2022, and she ran it in Botswana, a little bit of altitude. So for all intents and purposes, this actually is a slightly better performance. But look at some of the other women on this list. You have Julien Alfred, who's also here. You have Gabby Thomas, Abby Steiner, Shauna Miller-Weibo. She appears twice. So this is a very, very high quality list of women who have run really fast 200-meter performances in the month of April, significantly ahead of, schedule when talking about World Championships or Olympic Games, depending on the specific year. Now, also, want to add that Julien took down a very high quality field, at least in my opinion, in this race. You're talking about athletes like a Favor Ofili, right? A Daryl Nia, both of whom were Olympic finalists last year in the 200-meter dash. But you had other names like Tamari Davis, you had Rashida Adeleke, Nyaisha Berger from Jamaica. This was a very high quality field that Julien Alfred was able to take down. So it's not to say she ran this 21.88 in a simple vacuum. No, she did it against a very high quality field, and we know that she's more than capable of competing with the best. Like I said, Olympic Games gold medalist in the 100 and silver medalist in the 200. She is no slouch in any capacity. But the final thing that I do want to note is this performance kind of gives a clear indication that the longer sprint races that Julien Alfred has been running since the indoor season and also early in the outdoor season, it really seems to be working as it relates to her goals for the 200, as we saw here, and then potentially for her 100, where we know that Julien Alfred is easily one of the most explosive starters and one of the fastest athletes in the first half of her race. We know she's a gold medalist at the World Indoor Championships in the 60-meter dash. We know that she's the Olympic gold medalist in the 100, and she was one of the first athletes out the blocks. We know that in her 200-meter races, she really gets out very fast, but we know that she does maybe struggle slightly as it relates to some other 200-meter athletes in the second half of the race, right? When you're talking about a Gabby Thomas, a Sharika Jackson, or some of those other women, again, who may not be as explosive out of the blocks, but are very strong in the second half of the 200, especially as they're coming off the curve and heading towards that final. But based on this race, Julien Alfred did look a little more comfortable, and I think the 300s, the 400s that she's been running, it's really going to help her to reduce the deceleration that, sprinters, encounter when they're finishing off either their 100 or their 200. More specifically, Julien Alfred in this case, where, we've seen her get either run down by Gabby Thomas or beaten out by Gabby and Sharika or some others. And she actually even said this in an interview that she did right after this race in Florida. Shout out to my man Paul Hoff-Mahoney. Here's the interview clip.
You guys have been working on some longer distance stuff, some 300s, 400s, 4x4 legs. Did you feel those benefits of that in the closing stages of your race today?
I did, actually. I really did, feeling stronger and not breaking down as much as I did before. So I definitely feel the benefits of those longer races.
So what this essentially tells me is that Julien Alfred and her coach, Coach Flo, and her team as a whole, they're of course approaching 2025 slightly different, as we've seen by some of the races, but they're also not losing sight of things that have worked in 2024 and even, 2023, et cetera, et cetera. First, on the 100-meter side, where, yeah, sure, they're probably acknowledging that, yeah, we won the 100-meter Olympic gold ahead of everyone else, but how can we make sure that we not only maintain that lead, but potentially expand that lead as well, and make sure that if anyone steps back up, whether that's a Sha'Carri Richardson gets back to her 10.6, Sharika Jackson gets back healthy and is running 10.6s, how can we make sure that we're able to maintain our gap ahead of them if they get back to that? But then also some of the other women who might be stepping things up, whether that's a Melissa Jefferson, whether that's a Daryl Nita, and Dina Asher-Smith, TT Terry, Tia Clayton, who are all the other women that we were able to beat out in the 100? What if they start to step things up? How can we ensure sure that we actually stay ahead of them and then further improve that gap. That's what they're probably looking at as it relates to the 100-meter dash. And again, these 300s, the 400s, the longer sprint stuff that they were working on, how can we make sure we're targeting those areas of improvement? Then on the 200-meter side, very similar story. Yes, we acknowledge we got that silver medal at the Olympic Games last year, but remember, we were still behind Gabby Thomas. We didn't lead Gabby Thomas coming off that curve. How can we find ways to close that gap so we're either even or slightly ahead of Gabby Thomas and remain there as we're in when we get to a World Championship final, when we get to one of these Diamond League races? How can we do that? Let's get some of that longer distance work in to ensure we're ready for that. What if Sha'Carri Jackson comes back into the fold? We know that she's very similar. She gets off the curve, she's gone. How can we try and close that gap, or at least prepare for Sha'Carri Jackson returning healthy? Also, some of the other women who are behind, again, Dean Asher-Smith, what if she gets back into form? Daryl Nita, what if she really steps things up? Favor O'Feely, what if she really comes into the fold? Mackenzie Long, all these women who are in the conversation. Yes, we're ahead of them right now, and we finished silver at the Olympic Games, but how can we make sure we remain ahead? How can we make sure that we don't let them pass us? Again, some of this longer sprint stuff is going to be helping Julien Alfred, and we can see it come into fruition in this 200-meter race that she ran at Tom Jones. So yes, this 21.88, a really, really strong indicator for what Julien Alfred is capable of as she looks forward to the World Championships later on in Tokyo. Yes, it's very early in the season as it relates to Julien Alfred. You know, she's not competing in Grand Slam track, so she's not, really hammering it in for either Miami or Philly or, Los Angeles. Who knows? Again, I would love to see her as a challenger, but seems like she's not at the moment. But her goal is going to be the World Championships, so still early, but looks like she's heading in the right direction. Now, on top of that, this performance really does get me excited in the moment. I know we're still waiting for Sha'Carri, but it gets me excited for Julien Alfred versus Gabby Thomas. I'm almost looking at them two coming in from two different directions, where Julien Alfred, traditionally has been a 100, 200 meter sprinter. She's not a 400 runner. She's not a long sprinter. She's a short sprinter. But then Gabby Thomas, on the flip side, she is a long sprinter. She is a 200, 400 runner. Yes, of course, she has run, pretty well in the 100 in terms of certain races that she's competed in, but we see her as kind of a 200, 400 runner who is able to dip into the 100. So they're kind of approaching things from two different vantage points. And yes, Julien Alfred also ran a 400 meter personal best of 52.9 seconds, I think. But, of course, it's going to be from different vantage points, where 52.9 for Julien Alfred is, going to be significantly different than Gabby Thomas running a 49.1. Maybe if Gabby Thomas goes to Grand Slam track, I think she expressed that she does want to go to potentially in Myanmar. She might run the short sprints where it's 100 and a 200. Maybe she goes there and she runs 10.9. Yeah, that's not 10.7. That's not 10.8, but that might give a better indication of what she's capable of and the improvement that she might be making in the 200, where she already has a personal best of 21.60. So looking at it from these two different vantage points, at least to me, gets me excited about the matchup as we look forward to the season. I would love to see Julien Alfred in Grand Slam track, but if we don't, maybe we see them on the Diamond League compete, like they did last year, or maybe we only see it at World Champs. But these kind of performances and this progression that both of them are making, it really does get me excited for what to look forward to in Tokyo. And obviously, if you check out my last video that I did on the women's sprints, the kind of landscape there, where I have Julien Alfred as the favorite in the 100 and I have Gabby Thomas as the favorite in the 200. Gabby Thomas, at the end of the day, she still is the favorite because of not only her personal best, not only her performances, but her consistency in that 21.8 range. That's something that Julien Alfred hasn't gotten to yet. So we'll see if that does come into fruition. But this does give me a lot of hope. Now, the last thing I did want to note is this kind of dynamic with Gabby Thomas and Julien Alfred, approaching things, one from the short sprints, one from the long sprints. I think this kind of does give me some Allyson Felix, Veronica Campbell-Brown vibes in a sense. Now, it's not a one-to-one comparison by any means, especially as it relates to their accolades and their success, but just in terms of how they're approaching the event. Look at someone like Veronica Campbell-Brown. She was coming from a 100, 200 background and of course saw tons of success in both events, but then even more specifically in the 200, where she's a double Olympic champion, 2004 and 2008 in the 200. But in the 100, she's a world champion from 2007. She has an Olympic bronze medal from 2004 and 2012. She has world championship silver, I think, from 2011. So she has tons of accolades as it relates to the 100 and the 200, but she's approaching the 200 kind of from that short sprint group. But on the flip side, Allyson Felix has approached things kind of from the long sprint group. Her primary event has always been the 200, and she has always been consistent in the 100 when it comes to, competing at USAs. But look at what kind of occurred throughout her career, where she started to run 400s on the circuit. She was running 49 seconds, I think, as early as 2007. And then year after year, she was running 49s. She was running 49s very consistently across the board until we got to 2011, where she literally just doubled up at the World Championships, ran the 400, got the silver, ran the 200, got the bronze. 2012, yes, she did compete in the 100 and the 200, made it to the Olympic finals there, but later on, she competed in the 200, later on transitioned to the 400. So I think many people looked at Allyson Felix more as a 400-200 runner as opposed to a 100-200 runner like Veronica Campbell-Brown. And again, similar parallels where Allyson Felix, despite not having the fastest personal best in the 100, she was still able to really hold her own on the back straight of the 4x1 for the United States. She was also able to hold her own on second leg or, whatever different leg she would run for the 4x4 for the United States. Where Veronica Campbell-Brown, she was a mainstay in the 100 and the 200 throughout her career. Yeah, there was times where she, missed a team or whatever it may be because Jamaica was extremely competitive, but we also always saw her on that 4x1. So that's why I see some parallels. Again, I want to be clear. We know that, Veronica Campbell-Brown, she dominated the 200 when it came to the Olympics, at least in 2004, 2008. And then, of course, Allyson, she got the gold in 2012. But I'm seeing some parallels here, even to the effect of Veronica Campbell-Brown was explosive out of the block. She was always extremely fast, especially coming around that curve. But then Allyson Felix, despite not having a great start, she was able to really hold on and push through, again, decelerate the least relative to all the other athletes in the second half of the race and kind of like pull away. So that's what I'm looking at when I see Julien Alfred, Gabby Thomas. I'm very interested in this kind of matchup. Again, as Julien Alfred starts to get more and more competitive in the 200, we'll see as, Sharika Jackson, steps things up and gets healthy again. We'll see some of the other women, right? Brittany Brown, Favor O'Feely, Dinasha Smith, Daryl Nita. All these women are also in the conversation. So we'll see how things kind of do play out for the rest of the season. But excited for Julien Alfred and for Gabby Thomas. This 21.88, very, very high quality performance. And the last thing I do want to say, I don't want us to get too caught up in the fact that she ran 21.8 and then automatically, say that she's going to run 21.7, 21.6, 21.5, right? I don't want us to project that out. I mean, you could do that if you want, but what I'm thinking about is this simply gives me some hope that she's going to get a lot more consistent in the 21.9, 21.8 range. Who knows? She might very well hit a 21.6. She might very well hit a 21.5. I don't know, but I'm not going to predict that because I don't think that there's going to be this perfect linear trajectory. But if she gets more consistent in 21.8, then that's a problem for a lot of the field. Not only some of the other women that she beat out, but also for Gabby Thomas. Gabby Thomas already is very consistent in the 21.8s. She'll have to step things up, get more consistent in the 21.7s. Remember, Gabby has run 21.60 and 21.61, but she's not consistent there yet. She is very consistent in 21.8 and 21.7. So don't let Julien get into that realm, and then she'll, really start to mix things up. So we'll see. I'm not going to predict, 21.6, 21.5 for Julien. Nah, I don't want to do all that, but I do think this is a good indication of where she's going. Let me know what you think about Julien Alfred and this specific performance. Do you think that we'll see her get down to 21.7s, 21.6s, 21.5s? Who knows? Or do you think this means something a little bit different? And do you think that she'll be able to maybe take down someone like a Gabby Thomas at the World Championships later on this summer? Or do you think that maybe Gabby is still the foregone, favorite right now? And, that's all pending on if Sharika gets healthy, etc., etc. But let me know what you think. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. Always appreciate y'all. Thanks for watching.